Hello folks, welcome to another short video titled Digital Games for Learning, a Cognitive Approach to Drive Research, which is on my short paper with the same title that summarizes the arguments presented by Dr. Richard Myer in his chapter titled Cognitive Foundations of Game-Based Learning in the Handbook of Game-Based Learning by Plas, Myer and Homer. The link to the handbook and to the complete chapter is there in the description and to my original article as well. So I would like to encourage you all to read the whole article from the link in the description and the chapter as well. So let's move forward. Talking about the domain of games for learning, the Horizon report from 2012 to 2014 forecasted games and gamification to be a significant force in educational technology. The Matari report, launched in 2017 at the Serious Play conference, also predicted serious games revenue to spike to $8.1 billion by 2022. And a similar trend was observed by Statista, where they predicted huge growth for learning games from $3.5 billion in 2018 to $24 billion in 2024. So there have been many predictions around the growth of learning games. At the same time, researchers have also identified games and argued for the potential power of digital games to deliver learning. But at the same time, empirical research and evidence-based research around games for learning has produced mixed results and remains to be inconclusive. So what is the way forward for research in the area of games for learning? Dr. K in their 2016 article identified that games for learning research has been focused merely on establishing the effectiveness of games without looking at the processes, the design of learning games. And this has also been identified by other researchers where they talk about that a lot of learning games are designed poorly and are not informed by cognitive theories or learning theories, and there is not a lot of focus given to the learning outcomes that they intend to achieve. And with the whole push for learning games, it is likely that a lot of teachers and educators will be opting for learning games to engage students. And this is where the article that we are discussing today by Myer, the title Cognitive Foundations of Game-Based Learning, comes in, where they identify what should be the way forward in research when we are talking about learning games. So this article argues that probably the best way to move forward in the area of game for learning research is to go ahead with experimental research as the fundamental design, as this kind of design allows us to test causal claims about the effects of learning games and adopt an evidence-based approach as well, where we are comparing equivalent experimental and control groups. And then the fundamental experimental research design is broken into three genres. These three areas are value-added research, cognitive consequences research, and media comparison research, which we will talk about in detail in the next slide. So this slide is the heart of the Myer 2020 article, where they outline three broad kinds of experimental research that should be looked at as we move forward in the area of games for learning. The first one is value-added research, where the primary objective is to identify features of a game that work or that do not work, and in what setting do they work or they do not work. In this case, two groups, the experimental and the control group, play the same game but different versions of the game. So the control group will have a base version of the game, and let's say the experimental group will have a version of the game where one extra feature is added. And comparing those two groups on standardized tests will help us identify if that feature actually works in a positive way or in a negative way. Through previous lab experiments following a value-added research design, researchers have been able to identify a modality, personalization, pertaining, coaching, and self-explanation as some promising features of games, whereas immersion and redundancy were identified as some of the unpromising features. Talking about cognitive consequences research, this design is primarily focused on commercial of the shelf games, where the objective is to identify which genre of games might be helpful in promoting which cognitive skill. In this design, while the experimental group plays a commercial of the shelf game, the control group either plays a totally different game or does not play a game at all. And then again, they are tested on a cognitive skill. to identify if the game was actually helpful or not. And again, through lab experiments, the researchers have identified that first person shooter games and spatial puzzle games have demonstrated a positive effect on perceptual attention and 2D mental rotation, respectively. But other games like real time strategy, brain training games have shown unpromising effects on cognitive skills like spatial cognition, executive function, and perceptual attention. Finally, the media comparison research is this design is used to evaluate the effectiveness of games versus other traditional media like presentations or videos. Here, the idea is to identify if games are more effective, less effective, or equally as effective compared to some other traditional media. So, in this design, the participants in the experiment group play the game, and participants in the control group obtain the same academic content through slideshows, presentations, or videos. Through initial studies, the researchers have been able to generate some evidence, preliminary evidence about the positive effect of games for disciplines like science, mathematics, language, second language learning, and social sciences. So this was the core idea of the article, where they talk about what should be the research designs moving forward in the area of games for learning. And they identify that it is important to conduct replicability studies so that we are able to generate a definitive conclusion and generalize our results. The promising and unpromising effects identified through lab experiments should be taken with caution because these were done like in a controlled lab experiment, whereas it would be better if as we move forward we conduct our experiments in authentic learning environments, for example, classroom settings or informal learning settings. And they also call for design of games to be led by the focus on learning outcomes and learning processes. And data collection is encouraged to not be just one dimensional in terms of pre and post tests through standardized assessments, but also collecting multimodal data and using technology to collect to do eye tracking, to collect physiological data, to generate some heat maps, and some self-report surveys through participants. So this was it. Thank you very much for your time. I would encourage you to read my summary article, which is there in the link below, and also the full article to get a complete understanding of the arguments presented by the researcher by Dr. Myer in their paper. Thank you very much.